Hello, my name's Elise Hartley, and I thought coming home after deployment would finally bring me peace. But instead of the welcome I imagined, I found something missing. Not a person, but a promise. My father sold my late grandfather's Navy car, the one he'd sworn would stay in our family forever. To him, it was just metal and paint. To me, it was the last piece of honor we had left. That was the moment I realized sometimes the real battles don't happen at sea. They happen at home. The house looked the same from the outside, but the silence inside told me something sacred was gone. From the porch, the white siding gleamed under the April sun, the kind of flawless surface that made people assume everything inside was fine. But the moment I stepped through the front door, the air felt thinner, stripped of warmth, of sound, of memory. The faint echo of my own boots followed me down the hallway like an intruder. My grandfather's words returned, uninvited. "Keep it close, kiddo. One day, it'll protect you." I didn't know what he'd meant back then, but the word protect lingered now like a whisper from another life. The house smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. My mother's touch was everywhere, perfect cushions, clean counters, but it was all surface. The real home had always lived in the garage. That was where the Navy car rested, its steel blue skin catching morning light like a mirror of the sea. Grandpa had left it to me. It was supposed to be here, waiting. When I opened the garage door, light rushed in and hit nothing. Just concrete, dust, an oil stain where the tires had been. The space looked indecently naked. My father's voice came from behind me, calm, even casual. "Oh, that old thing? I sold it." I turned slowly. "You what?" He shrugged, mug in hand, as if he'd only misplaced a tool. "Derek needed the funds. You know how weddings are these days." The words hit harder than a gunshot. "You sold Grandpa's Navy car? Without even asking me?" He sipped his coffee. "It was just sitting there, Elise. You're never home. Might as well do something useful." Useful. The words scraped something raw inside me. That car wasn't a thing. It was a promise. A lifetime folded into metal and oil and pride. I stared at him, searching for even a flicker of guilt, but all I saw was the familiar armor of practicality he wore whenever conscience knocked too loudly. My mother appeared at the doorway, her hands twisting a dish towel. "Please," she murmured. "Not now. It's Derek's big week." Her voice cracked, and that was somehow worse. Dinner that night felt like sitting through a storm that never broke. Derek scrolled through his phone, grinning at photos of his fiancée's dress. My father talked about guest lists, deposits, networking opportunities. I cut my steak into perfect squares and didn't taste a bite. Under the table, my fingers brushed the small brass key on my keychain, the one engraved with JWH Grandpa's initials, the one he'd pressed into my palm the night before he died. "Keep it close." After everyone went to bed, I slipped out into the garage again. The air smelled faintly of oil and rain. I knelt beside the patch of darker concrete where the tires had once rested. My fingertips traced the outline of a faint stain, darker than the rest, and I realized it formed a subtle shape. A compass arrow pointing toward the door. For a moment, I just stared. The breath left my body, slow and steady. Maybe it was coincidence, or maybe it was his way of telling me not to lose my direction. Whatever it was, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let this betrayal fade quietly. The next morning, I called every dealership in the county, until one voice answered and said, "Ma'am, I think you should come down here." He said they found something in my grandfather's car, something with my name on it. By the time I reached Seaside Auto, the harbor wind had salted my lips and steadied my pulse. The building looked tired in a dignified way. Corrugated siding, faded pennants, a bell above the office door that chimed like a ship's bell. Inside, the smell hit me first. Oil, old vinyl, and a briny note that made memory feel close enough to touch. A man in a canvas jacket stepped from behind the counter. "Nolan Briggs," he said, offering a hand he'd clearly learned to shake from someone who valued presence over force. Dad was a Navy machinist. I recognized that uniform and that name. His gaze softened. We kept the car in back. He led me through a service bay where radio static murmured an old tune. My breath shortened when the steel blue profile came into view, familiar lines catching the light like a held salute. Nolan opened the passenger door gently. "We found this under the glove box liner." In a plastic sleeve, Harold's dog tags, cool and stubborn in my palm, a note in his blocky hand, "If sold, call her," and a partial title sheet stamped pending estate consent. Nolan tapped the form. "Sales legally incomplete. Without your signature, it shouldn't transfer. I put a hold in the system." The room thinned around us. "Thank you," I said, every syllable scraped clean. He nodded toward the dash. "Your grandfather thought ahead. Folks like my dad, they always do." The brass key on my chain felt heavier. For a breath, the bay dissolved, replaced by sunlit Sundays. 10-year-old me in the front seat, Grandpa's forearm steady on the wheel, the U.S. Navy tag winking in the mirror. "Honor isn't for sale," he'd said, voice even, like a bearing you could plot a life by. Nolan's voice slid back in, careful not to break anything fragile. "We didn't pry further. But these old units sometimes have a second hide, seat rails or the trunk wall." He stepped back. "Your call, Commander." I circled to the rear. The trunk lock was stubborn until the brass teeth caught and turned with a click that reached into the past and pulled me forward. Light pooled across a tidy well. Beneath the mat, the board didn't sound right. 2 flush screws hid in the paint seam. The key had a thinner tooth, almost ornamental. It found a tiny slot and turned. The panel lifted. Oilcloth. A breath. Then wood. Dovetail corners worn smooth. Lid etched with honor. JWH. My name trembled in my throat. I set the box on a folded blanket, hands steady only because they had to be. Inside, velvet dark as harbor water. Metals glinting like small suns. Photos of sailors squinting into wind. A folded envelope sealed in the ship's stationery, the faint anchor watermark catching. My grandfather's presence gathered. Not a ghost, but a command to stand straight. Nolan stood a respectful distance, eyes lowered. "Take your time." I broke the seal. Paper breathed. The room seemed to hold itself still, as if the tide had paused at full. When I opened the letter, his handwriting stared back at me, steady, unshaken, as if he'd known this day would come. The letter smelled of oil and sea salt, like a memory that refused to fade. Fluorescence hummed above me in the legal affairs office at Naval Base Norfolk, a cold chorus that made every heartbeat sound louder than it should. Navy flags lined the corridor in disciplined rows. Plaques and framed commendations reflected me in hard little shards. I set the dog tags, the note, and the partial title on Lieutenant Sophia Marks's desk and kept my hands clasped so she wouldn't see them shake. Marks read the stationery first, running a finger along the faint anchor watermark. "Official stock," she said, voice even. "Dated 1989, signed by Commander Samuel Wexler." She looked up. "Relief Car Project Commander, Semi-Shadow Program. Trusted retirees moved emergency funds and supplies to veterans who fell through the cracks. Your grandfather was one of them." The room seemed to tilt and steady again. I pictured Harold's hands on the wheel, the steel blue hood swallowing miles. "Honor isn't for sale," he'd told me. I'd thought it was a lesson. It had been an assignment. Marks tapped keys. A database bloomed on her screen. "There's a sponsor line here. Civilian liaison." She enlarged it until the pixels gave way to clarity. "Gordon Hartley." My breath shortened. My father hadn't been ignorant. He'd been involved. He'd known what the car carried and sold it anyway. My phone buzzed. An email from him, unemotional as a balance sheet. Let it go, Elise. Don't turn this into a spectacle. Family first. I closed the message and handed Marks the dog tags instead. Run whatever you can, I said. Freeze whatever you can. Nolan's attachments arrived a beat later. Scanned bills of lading, a shipment manifest, and a small index of recipients with initials and dates. Under the table, my boot pressed against the floor like I could hold myself to ground that way. By dusk, rain began shouldering the windows. The office emptied to a low murmur of printers and the far-off thud of doors. Mark slid a flash drive toward me. Archive mirror. There's a subfolder I couldn't open without physical media. Try a secure terminal. In the base lab, the drive woke with a green blink. A directory named 1989 opened into images. Harold in faded blues. A younger Gordon beside him, sleeves rolled, both men loading boxes into the trunk of the staff car. Another photo. A kitchen table, envelopes, cash book, coffee mugs, a note in Harold's hand. For Thompson. Bridge rent until May. I leaned closer until the glass of the monitor cooled my skin. He hadn't been blind to honor. He just chose to sell it. The difference burned. Outside, the storm deepened. Wipers beat time as I drove back toward the harbor, water turning streetlights into trembling spears. I replayed Harold's line from the letter. If your father forgets what honor is, remind him. Quietly, but completely. Quiet wasn't weakness. It was aim. Near midnight, my phone lit the cabin with a hard white square. I pulled to the shoulder, rain clattering on the roof like spent brass. Lieutenant Marks calls at midnight. Commander, you should know, the sale transfer has been frozen. The buyer's funds are traced to Derek's wedding account. Then the wedding is where this ends. They raised their glasses to love and legacy. I raised mine to truth. The chandeliers threw gold light across the ballroom, softening everything that shouldn't have been forgiven. Crystal rang. Laughter swelled. Cameras hovered like curious moths over silk and champagne. My father stood near the podium, handsome in that polished way that age and money can fake, his arm on Derek's shoulder. To family, he said, and the crowd repeated it like a prayer. I stepped through the back doors before anyone saw me. The double brass buttons of my dress uniform caught the light, and conversations thinned into silence. The quartet faltered mid-note. In the reflection of the glass walls, I saw what they saw. Composure cut in navy blue, medals gleaming like small verdicts. Before you celebrate legacy, I said, my voice clear against the hush, you should know what it costs. I walked to the center table. The white cloth shimmered beneath the chandeliers, flawless until I set the small wooden box on it. Honor. JWH. The name carved into the lid seemed to pulse in the silence. Derek's fiancée blinked, smile stiffening. Elise? My father's voice cracked like old varnish. Elise, not now. I met his gaze. Now's the only time that counts. I opened the box, lifted the letter, and began to read. If this car is ever sold, I said, the words roughening as they met air. Someone forgot what it means to earn something. Gasps rippled through the hall. Gordon moved forward, hand outstretched. Stop this. You don't understand. Oh, I understand, I said. You took what wasn't yours to sell. You used the last thing he built to buy another man's approval. Colonel Raymond Ellis, the bride's father, rose from his chair, voice cutting the murmur. Is this true? Derek's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Dad said it was legal. Legal, I echoed, but not right. From the back, an older man stood. John Harold Whitlock, he said, voice trembling with memory. He saved my family in '89. That car carried medicine to my son. I'm Marvin Blake. I owe that man my life. The ballroom shifted. The crowd turned. Even the servers paused. I lifted the official Navy letter for all to see. The seal glinted under chandelier light. Confirmed by Naval Archives. Relief car project, legitimate humanitarian operation. Harold Whitlock served honor even after he retired. Phones rose like a forest. The live stream chat flickered across the projection screens. Hero's car sold for a wedding? Hartley family scandal? Commander exposes truth at ceremony. Derek stepped back, pale. My father's jaw tightened. The sound of applause began, hesitant, then rising. Veterans among the guests standing one by one. I turned to my father. Dad, you didn't just sell a car. You sold the only promise that ever mattered. I handed Colonel Ellis the letter and the medals. Sir, these belong to people who still understand duty. He saluted me with quiet respect. One by one, the veterans in the room mirrored the gesture. Gordon tried to lift his eyes but couldn't. His hand trembled around his untouched glass. I looked at Derek one last time. When you sell a man's honor, don't be surprised if it buys you shame. The room fell into a silence so perfect it rang. I turned, straightened my shoulders, and walked away. The press lights flared against my back, each flash a thunderclap of exposure. Outside, the harbor air felt mercifully cool. The horizon burned copper with sunset. And there, parked beneath a line of fluttering flags, waited the steel blue car. Nolan Briggs leaned against it, hands in his pockets, quiet as ever. The truth had found its parking spot. They called it a scandal. I called it peace, the kind you earn when you stop apologizing for surviving. June light poured through the glass atrium of the Blue Haven Veterans Heritage Division, rinsing the polished floor in a quiet seawater glow. The staff car gleamed at the center like a patient star, chrome catching the slow sway of the flag beyond the pier. A small crowd formed a respectful crescent. The director introduced me as Harold Whitlock's granddaughter, and as the officer who reminded a town why honor matters. I stepped to the microphone with my palm steady and my breath unhurried. I didn't fight for revenge, I said. I fought to remember. The words felt simple and sufficient, like returning a keepsake to the hand that had been reaching for it all along. Faces softened. Someone in uniform bowed their head. The quartet in the corner let the final note of Eternal Father hang a moment longer than the sheet music allowed. After the applause thinned, my father approached, older in the eyes, smaller in the shoulders, a folded flag pressed to his chest. Your grandfather's, he said, voice frayed. I kept it wrong all these years. You're keeping it right now, I told him. He nodded once, then cleared his throat. The wedding fund, he added, barely above a whisper. It's going to the Veterans Relief Fund. Every dollar. Not an apology. A correction. I didn't forgive him in a speech. I let the choice stand the way good timber stands, weight-bearing, testable with time. Mrs. Layton, thin as a page and bright as a bell, found me next with a worn envelope. Your grandfather wrote us in '91, she said. She read a line aloud, her voice trembling into a smile. Kindness travels farther than any vehicle we build. A few guests reached for handkerchiefs. Nolan lifted his chin in quiet salute. Lieutenant Sophia Marks gave me the kind of smile you offer when justice finally sits down and rests. Mr. Lang appeared at my elbow, smelling faintly of pipe tobacco and sea wind. He left this with me years ago in case the compass ever went missing. Inside the envelope lay one brass key and a note in Harold's even hand. The sea takes, but it also returns. Keep your course. The key warmed in my palm as if it had remembered the road before I did. I walked the perimeter of the exhibit, reading the new placard beneath the car. Honor, never sold. The letters looked ordinary until you realized how much it costs to carve words you mean. Outside, gulls stitched white seams across a blue sky. I carried the brass key to the memorial box and set it inside, hearing the soft click of a life closing cleanly, not angrily. At the water's edge, breeze rifled my hair. Images rose and fell like tide. The empty garage, the oil stain shaped like a compass, Nolan's quiet call, the ballroom gone silent under chandeliers, my father lowering his glass. They took the car. I found the road. And somewhere between those, I found the part of myself that doesn't flinch when the room demands truth. Behind me, camera shutters were gentler now. Not hunting scandal, just keeping record. I turned toward the atrium. A cluster of cadets gathered around the display, one of them reading the plaque aloud, trying the syllables on like a new uniform. Integrity is not inherited, it's chosen. They laughed softly, not at the line, but at the certainty of their own beginnings. I let the sound pass through me like good weather. My father stood a few paces back, the flag returned to the case, his hands empty for the first time in a long time. He didn't ask for absolution, he simply stayed. Sometimes that is the start. I tipped 2 fingers to the brim of an invisible cap and stepped into the bright strip of sun crossing the floor. Maybe that's what he meant by keeping the course. I've walked through storms and silence alike, and here's what I've learned. Peace doesn't come from winning an argument. It comes from refusing to live beneath a lie. If my story meant something to you, tell me what part spoke loudest. Would you have done the same? Comment your thoughts, not for me, but for anyone who's ever been told to stay quiet. Because truth doesn't survive in silence. It needs voices, even trembling ones, to carry it forward. And if life ever asks you to choose between comfort and integrity, choose the road that hurts now but heals forever. Honor isn't inherited, it's chosen every single day.